I want you to think about the last time you had to have a hard conversation with someone you love. Not a blow up, not an argument. I'm talking about a real conversation where you had something to say that mattered and two things happened. Either you didn't have the words or you found the words and just didn't say them. Now here's my question to you, and it's going to be an uncomfortable one. Were those actions about them, or did that silence come from somewhere else? Somewhere early. Say a house you grew up in, at a table where you didn't have a voice, and with people who love you but didn't really teach you how to speak. While you ponder on those questions, I want to welcome you to the first episode of The Family Arc, a 5-part series that discusses how tired I am of watching people, myself included, entering into relationships with baggage given to us as children, and now that we're adults, realizing the heaviness of it. That's right. Tonight, I'm starting at the root. I'm not here to down your partner. I'm not here to talk about your relationship. I'm here to get to the bottom of it, and it begins at the house, the very house that you grew up in. Because see, I realize that the house we grew up in is the very house that either built our voice or buried our voice. And for a lot of us, it buried our voice. Hello and welcome to another episode of This Could Get Ugly featuring Sean D. Upshaw. Of course, I am him. And as I said, we're going to have a great topic. Tonight we're discussing, have my parents silenced my ability to communicate? Have my parents silenced my ability to communicate? Let me paint a picture for you. Say you're a child, right? We all been there. We all been children. Say you're upset, genuinely upset about something that feels real and significant to you. And instead of being met with curiosity or patience, you're met with a phrase. The phrase may sound like, stay in a child's place. Stop crying before I give you something to cry for. You don't have an opinion on the matter. Or my all-time favorite, do as I say and not as I do. And in that moment, something happened that you didn't realize, right? Something happened that gave you an opportunity to look at it, to gain a language, right? But you couldn't because you were a child. Your mind hadn't developed. So what happens next? Your inner child gets legislated. Not corrected, not guided, but shut down by the very people whose entire job is to help you understand yourself in situations like that. Now, here's where I need you to understand. I mean, really understand. Not nod your head yes, or raise your hand like we do or did on other episodes. I want you to understand that those phrases that I gave to you, they weren't just dismissive. They subconsciously installed a specific belief inside of you. If you don't believe me, let me give you an example. Stay in a child's place. Guess what that taught us? It taught us that your thoughts have no value until someone with authority validates them. That hierarchy determines who gets to speak. And you carry that very thing into relationships, every job, every room you've walked into, and you felt smaller than the person across from you. Think about that for a second. Am I lying? The next one, stop crying before I give you something to cry about. What that taught us is that expressing pain invites more pain. that vulnerability is a liability. And you carried that into relationships. You did the same thing as the first one. You carried that into a relationship, excuse me, where your partner begs you to open up and you physically cannot because your body believes that showing emotion is dangerous. But the dangerous part is you can't show emotion. Let's talk about the third one and my favorite. Do as I say and not as I do. What did that teach us? It taught us that rules are not real, that integrity is optional, that people who are supposed to model behavior for you don't even believe in the damn behavior themselves. And you carry that into a worldview, not just a relationship, but a worldview where trust feels naive and hypocrisy feels normal. I guess you thought those phrases were the final boss. But guess what? They weren't, because this next one I'm about to give you is the final boss, excuse me. This is the one that gave you a unconscious loyal contract. This one phrase just didn't silence you in any moment. It silenced you as a policy. What goes on in this house stays in this house. How many of you heard that one? What goes on in this house stays in this house. Think about what that actually teaches us as kids. It doesn't say some things are private. It says everything that happens here is a secret. And your job, even though your mind is not developed fully as a kid, is to protect that secret. Not process it, not question it, no, but to guard it. That's not a boundary, excuse me, because I don't want to confuse these words. That's not a boundary. That's a gag order wrapped in a loyalty situation. Yeah, you heard me. That's not a boundary, that's a gag order wrapped in loyalty. Because what a child hears underneath that phrase is this. If you tell anyone what's going on, if you say anything, you are betraying this family. You are the problem. Not what happens, you, for thinking about letting it out. So what does that child learn? Learn that my safety depends on my ability to be silent. My belonging is dependent on how well I hide what's real. Then that child does the miraculous thing that we all do as children, grow up. Then we get into relationships. We choose someone to partner with and do life with. What happens? We find someone who genuinely loves us, at least I hope. And then they say those magic words, talk to me. And then what happens? We don't have an answer. They say, what's going on? We don't have an answer. And it's not that we don't have an answer. It's just that we're wired a certain way. And it's nothing we could do about it. Let me explain something to you. I mentioned last week about our operating system being the issue. And that's exactly what this case is. We don't have a problem expressing ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. What we have is a problem deep down in our operating system that if we feel like we share things, it's almost like a betrayal. Let me give you an example. Here's a story time. You guys are familiar with this. This is where I give you a story about how I even reached this particular topic. I want to take you back to when I was a little kid. My grandfather was a very, very Very, very important man, to say the least. Prestigious. That's what I was trying to say. Excuse me. His reputation preceded him everywhere he went. He was a pastor. Everyone known him. He's very well known. In fact, my mom used to show me pictures of him shaking hands with the former president of the United States, Bill Clinton. That's how important he was. Guess he knew Bill Clinton by first name. Cool. As a kid, you see that type of stuff, you gain a sense of pride. You say, damn, that's my grandfather. He's important. He was a pastor. He used to come up to Detroit a lot, do a lot of revivals for a week. He would either stay with us or he'd go stay with my uncle or whatever the case may be. I remember this one in particular time, he came up there and he stayed with us and he had a revival. It was at my uncle's church. I don't understand what happened, or I really don't even remember, but I remember us being in the hallway of that church and me having something to say to him. I wanted to express a feeling. I don't know if it was concerning the scripture. Like I said, I don't even remember exactly what it was about. But what I do remember is the feeling that I gained from the experience that he gave me. As I was saying, I was trying to explain something to him. I was trying to express something that mattered to me, trying to open up, trying to let someone that I feel is here in on what I'm thinking down here. And my grandfather, the patriarch, the man of the family, the very person that held everything together, whose opinion carried more weight than anybody in my life at that particular moment, even my own biological dad and a stepfather that lived in the house, by the way. As I expressed to him my feelings, he looked me square in my eyes and he told me, "Shut up, boy. You acting like a sissy." Now I can now I can laugh at that as an adult, but imagine what it does to you as a kid. One word, that's all it took. One word from the man at the top of my family's structure ruined everything. And what happened simultaneously, he shut down my voice and my masculinity, excuse me, was put on trial simply for having a feeling and expressing it. I'm not gonna front. That effed me up as a child. Effed me up. I learned in that single moment that expressing yourself as a man, as a boy trying to be a man, makes you less, not more, less. Vulnerability obviously wasn't a strength in my family. Clearly, it was viewed as a weakness. And that weakness had a name. And that name was designed to make me never try again, because who the hell wants to be called a sissy? I don't know if you guys know what that means, but back in the day, that's almost as synonymous as somebody calling you a mother, you know what I'm saying? Or BAN. You know what that is. If you don't, look up in the Urban Dictionary, it explain it all. But that's what that was synonymous to back in that day. So, needless to say, I carried that for years and years. Not as a memory, though. I want you to understand it. It didn't become a memory. It became a reflex. Every time I felt something and I wanted to express it, there was that gate stopping me from saying it. It was standing in my way. And all I can hear behind that gate is my grandfather's voice telling me, "Sean, real men don't do this." Imagine that. The patriarch didn't just silence me. He made my masculinity the price of my vulnerability. And I spent years, and I mean years, paying that debt in every relationship I encountered until one day I just said, forget it. And for those who know me, they know now there's no governor on this right here. I say what needs to be said because the truth needs to be said. But what I have learned up to this point is truth needs to be said, but it needs to be said in love. And that's what I attempt to do on a daily basis. So let me explain the transfer. When something like that happens and it transfer into your relationship, let's talk about what this actually looks like when it follows you into that situation. Because trust me, it does, and it does every single time. I'm not going to debate you on this. I've had countless conversations. I know this to be true. Let me explain something to you. 3 things. If you were punished as a child for speaking up, you were shut down when conflict arises with your partner. Not because you don't care, but because your nervous system learned at an early age that speaking up equals punishment. And that lesson didn't leave you the very moment you turned 18. No, 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 no. It doesn't do that. It actually carries on with you until you make a decision to leave it where it's at. Let's talk about the next one. If your emotions were dismissed as a child, guess what you do? You minimize your own needs. You swallow things, you let them build. And then one day you explode over something small and your partner is just sitting there looking at you like you done lost your ever loving mind. Because the truth is, you've been carrying it for months and months, and that unspoken weight finally just was lifted. And the reason it happened is because you never learn, that your feelings deserve space. Not only in your parents' presence, your siblings' presence, your family presence, your relationships, but it deserves a space. Is that you though? Think about that. Is that you? Because I've talked to many people and they experience this very one. This is a popular one right here. But before I crown it, let's go to the third one. If you never saw what repair after arguments look like, and I mean true repair, I mean come back together and acknowledge what you've done and move forward with a better understanding, then you don't know what the hell you're doing. So after a fight, if you have a fight, you go cold. Or you act like nothing happened. You act like nothing ever happened. Try to go back to normal. Or you wait. I'm guilty of this. Or you wait till the other person finds it and fixes it because you genuinely don't have the model, for what coming back looks like. So you're expecting your partner to step in and fix it. Now, here's the thing. Let me tell you what happens when that happens too much. Your partner begins to experience abandonment. As you're carrying, listen, trust me, I've been there. I put people in positions where they felt this abandonment, this indifference, right? And the truth is, you care. You really do. You really want to make it work. You just never was put on that road to learn how to make it work, to come back after something pops off like that. Now, here's the triggering part for me about this situation. Well, I ain't gonna say triggering because I'm past that. Here's the interesting part. That's a better word. I experience every level of what I just told you. I mean, every level to the point where it put me in position where I was so nonchalant about everything. Nonchalant, passive aggressive, all the things that never ever can sustain a relationship. In fact, the funny thing about it is I was dealing with this young lady and she told me something so funny. She said, Sean, I love you, but I can't deal with you. She said, not only are you nonchalant, but you just be chalanting too damn much? I laughed so hard. I'm like, what are you talking about? What the hell is chalanting? She said, it's just a level above nonchalant where you chalant too much. And it puts people in position where they don't know how you feel about them. And it's crazy. It's crazy. It's insane to be in a relationship and you walking around doing life with this person and you in your mind you thinking she know how I feel about her, you know I love you. Nah, bruh, or nah, sis, they don't know. They can assume, but eventually assumptions run out, right? At least I hope you know they run out. At that moment when she told me I'll be chalanting too much, the most hilarious thing I ever heard about me, it was that moment I stopped being confused about my relationships and start being honest about my roots. Now, I told you something last week. I don't know if it went over a lot of you guys' head, but I'm going to say it again. Never, ever, ever believe that you are healed. Healed with an ED. ED, that means it's complete. You're never healed. Nobody's ever completely healed. What you can do is you can make a choice to be healing, like an ongoing thing, like waking up being willing to heal that particular thing. And through healing, you might experience a level of being healed, but you're never just at a consistent level of being healed. Because at any given moment, something can trigger you, excuse me, if you're not careful and you're not aware of what's going on. So I want to throw that out there. But like I said, I had to be honest about my roots. But here's the through line I need you to hear. Silence isn't the absence of communication. Silence isn't the absence of communication. Silence is actually a communication style. It was modeled for you. If you go down that road, you learned it, you practice it, and for years, and you you brought it in most or almost rather every intimate relationship as if it was your personality. That's not your personality. What you allowed it to be was your inheritance. You want to talk about that? That's a nasty inheritance to get, if you ask me. Because it forces you to look in the mirror. And here's the mirror that we never want to look in, right? Now I'm going to flip this. I'm going to flip it on his head, right? Because it's only right that I do this. Because if I only talk about what everything has done to us, then I'm only giving you a half truth. I'm only giving you a half truth. Here's the flip side. A lot of us are parents now. Dun, dun, dun. A lot of us are parents now. And guess what we did when we became parents? We made a vow. We made a vow, conscious or not, that we would never, ever, ever make our children feel the way that we felt coming up. Don't get me wrong, I respect that vow. I took the oath myself. I understand it completely. But I need to tell you something that might be uncomfortable about that vow. You didn't heal once you had kids. You didn't heal. What you did was you overcorrected. And the overcorrection is still being controlled by that womb. Did you hear me? An overcorrection, which is what you did, is still being controlled by the womb. Now, I want you to think about what that looked like in practice. This is one I'm guilty of. How many of you have stopped saying no to your kids? Because no one knows what rejection feels like or being told no better than us. So we don't want our kids to feel that. How many of us just do everything for our kids because we don't want them to struggle. At least that's how we frame it. We don't want them to struggle in the way that we did. Or here's my favorite one. How many of us had tried to be their friend instead of their parent because we wanted that so-called open relationship that we never had? And listen, I understand every single impulse that I just told you. I understand it. I overstand it. I genuinely do. But I need to tell you something, people, ladies and gentlemen. Here's what we here is what we're actually teaching our kids. When you never say no, you teach your kids that their desires are the center of reality. That limits are personal attacks. That love means total accommodation. And they walk into their first serious relationship. They walk into their first serious relationship. And the very time that their partner introduces a boundary feels like cruelty to them because no one ever loved them enough to say no to them before. Guilty. I'm guilty. Are you? Are you going to admit it? Let's be accountable here, ladies and gentlemen. That's what This Can Get Ugly is all about. This could get ugly. That's accountability at its finest. Let's talk about another one. Another one. When you do everything for them, you teach them that they are not capable. Whether you want to believe that or not, when you do everything for your kid, you teach them that they are not capable, that discomfort is an emergency, that someone should always be available to remove the obstacle before they ever have an opportunity to face it. And then guess what? They become adults who cannot self-soothe, who need their partner to manage their emotions. They need their partner to manage the very world of their emotions. And then they fall apart when life requires them to figure something out alone. Y'all not about to sit up here and make me believe that I'm the only one that don't realize that this is happening or realize that this is happening. But the final and last one, when you try to be their friend instead of their parent, I have so many friends that do this. When you try to be their friend instead of their parent, this is the one that costs you the most. You don't believe me? If you never changed this particular one, I guarantee you're experiencing it right now as we speak. When you try to be your child's friend instead of their parent, it costs you heavily. You're not supposed to give them a friend. And you don't give them a friend because, dude, when they grow up to be an adult, it turns into something. And I'm so flabbergasted by this because I've been guilty of this. I tell my daughter all the time, or I used to anyway. I ain't probably told her in a while. I'm your only friend. No, I'm your parent, baby. I'm your parent, baby. Because here's what happens. It crosses a boundary. You don't give them another friend. You give them another adult they have to take care of because children are not equipped. They're not equipped. I repeat, they are not equipped to hold their parents' emotional needs. That's why they are not your friend, ladies and gentlemen. When you collapse that boundary, when you make them your confidant, your equal, your emotional support, you put a weight on them they were never built to carry. They were never built to carry. And then they spend their adult life either attracting emotionally dependent partners because that's what feels like love to them. Or even worse, becoming unavailable because they are exhausted from a lifetime of managing someone else's feelings. My overcorrection from my childhood at one point was not being able to tell my daughter no. It wasn't until I woke up and realized that what I was doing, that I had to change that. Because when I did tell her no and meant it, she would act out a certain way. We would have to have a conversation. So after having that conversation, now what happens is I don't tell her no still, but it's for a different reason. Excuse me. Me not telling her no is for the purposes of just her handling her business. Like I always tell her, if you handle your business, you can do whatever you want to do. And that's exactly how it is. She handles her business. I never have to tell her anything. So I don't tell her no when she asks me for things. But guess what I had to develop, and guess what, based on the conversation that we had developed. When I do tell her no and mean a hard no, she gets it. She understands it. She analyzes it now. She say, well, why no this time? Now I'm able to have this conversation and not feel bad about telling her no. That's something we have to do as parents. I don't know which one that you suffer from, but that particular one was up here for me. The other ones, well, I did, but they were kind of like down here. But that one up here, that one was up here. My overcorrection was not being able to say no. I can admit that, but it's changed since then, and I'm glad it has, because my daughter's she's older now. She's about to become an adult. She don't need to go out in the world believing that nobody should be able to tell her no. I teach her now that rejection is a part of life. No is a part of life. It's how you respond to that type of stuff that ultimately, makes you the person that contributes to society in the way that I see it, in the way that other people around you see it. Once I had that conversation, I realized that I wasn't parenting from my wombs anymore. I was parenting from wisdom. Those two things are different. You need to find out if you're parenting from wisdom or are you parenting from that womb. Believe me, it's going to help you. It's going to establish the proper boundaries needed in order to grow and everybody around you grow. So here's my question. I want every parent in here. I want every parent in here to sit with this and ask yourself, are you really giving your child what they need? Or are you giving your inner child what it never got? Because those are not the same thing. And confusing them is one of the most loving mistakes a parent can make. So let's bring this all the way home. Because ultimately, this show is about relationships. And everything we talked about tonight lives in your relationship right now, whether you want to admit it or not. The person you chose, the dynamic you created, the arguments you keep having, the silence that sits between you, sometimes like a third person in the room, none of that is random. None of it. Your relationship is the most accurate mirror, or a past relationship if you're not in one, is the most accurate mirror of your family system that exists. You remember that loyalty contract I was telling you about earlier where what happens in this house stays in this house? Well, like I said, that didn't expire when you moved out. That's the reason you sit across from someone who's asking you a direct question. What's wrong? What are you feeling? And your first instinct isn't to answer, it's to manage. It's the reason you calculate what's safe to say, like you're protecting something, except you're not even sure what you're protecting anymore. And at this point, we're grown. You're not guarding your parents' house anymore. What you're guarding is a habit. And it's time that you realize that you're guarding the habit. As I said, a reflex. That's what it is. A reflex that's used to keep you safe as a child is now keeping you isolated as an adult. Think about that for a second. Understand that. Wrestle with that. Sit with that. Let it jump all over you. A reflex that used to keep you safe as a child, which was what happens in this house stays in this house, is now keeping you isolated as an adult. But here's the thing: your partner isn't asking you to betray anything. They're not doing that. They're not asking you to go against anything. They're asking you to let them in. They're knocking. Let me in. But the sad part is your body don't know the difference. Because nobody ever rewrote your code. And when your code doesn't get rewrote, you begin to develop patterns. Would you care to hear something? I got 4 of them for you. Pattern 1, the silencer becomes the stonewaller. What does this mean? You learn that silence was safety. So when a partner brings up something hard, you go blank. You leave the room emotionally and physically. Then guess what? I said this earlier. Your partner feels abandoned. And you feel like you're surviving. There's that word again. Your partner feels abandoned. You feel like you're surviving. Pattern 2. The dismissed child becomes the over-explainer. Woohoo! My God, let me be the one to tell you. This one right here speaks directly to me. Why? Because I never had space for my feelings. So at one point, I felt like just over justifying everything. And what happens is every boundary comes with a 10-minute, 15-minute, 20-minute explanation because you still believe that your needs are only valid if you can build an airtight case for them to exist. Pattern 3, the parentified child becomes the fixer. What happens with this is you learn to manage everyone's emotions before your own. Do you know what happens to a person that prioritizes everybody's emotions over their own? I'll tell you what happened. In a relationship, you become a caretaker. You anticipate. You saw problems your partner didn't even ask you to solve. And the tricky part is when they don't appreciate you for it, you start to feel invisible because that's exactly how you felt as a child. The last pattern, pattern 4, the overcorrecting parent becomes the doormat partner. The same impulse that makes you unable to tell your child no. Guess what? In some cases, it makes you unable to hold a boundary with your partner. You accommodate more, you absorb more, you swallow more until one day you don't. And then, as I said, they're blindsided by your rage without one single warning because you've held it in. So you do know I can't give you patterns, right? Without giving you a way to get out those patterns, a way to rebuild. So just like I gave you 4 patterns, I got 4 rebuilds. Here's what we do, because I'm going to be real with you. Awareness is one thing to be aware, which I'm trying to make you aware by having shows like this. Because I believe awareness without action is just sophisticated self-pity. Yeah, you heard me, and I'll repeat it. I believe that awareness without action is nothing but sophisticated self-pity. And I'm not here for that, and I believe neither are you. Here are 4 rebuilds. Rebuild 1, identify your silence signature. Do you shut down? Deflect humor, over explain, go passive aggressive? I'm talking to myself basically because I used to do this. You can't fix what you haven't named with precision. That's my point. You can't fix what you haven't named with precision. So name it. I named it. That's why it's in my notes. I named it. You can name it. Take on the lyrics of the song. Anything you can do, I can do better. Trust me, I'm not going to say, no, you can't. Yes, you can. You can. So do it. Write it down. Be specific. And for those who don't know, be Pacific, as some people say. Be Pacific. But no, be specific about it. Write it down. This is real. I desire change for you. Rebuild 2. Trace it back, then cut the cord. Trace it back, then cut the cord. 1 honest exercise. Write down how conflict was handled in your home. I say this every week. Be honest about what you're writing down. Be honest about the conflict that happened in your home. Then write down how you handle it now. The reason I'm saying that is because the overlap is your inheritance that you're currently in right now. Naming it strips it of automatic power. Rebuild 3, practice low stakes expressions first. You can't learn to communicate under emotional fire. Start with small daily moments of saying exactly what you mean to save people. I feel like I should repeat that because I feel like a lot of people didn't hear that. Start with small daily moments of saying exactly what you mean to save people. Emphasis on save people. Build the muscle before the game. Rebuild 4. Create a repair ritual. Since you likely never saw what after an argument looks like, you need to build one consciously. What does coming back look like for you and your partner? Is it a phrase you both agree on that signals you to, baby, I'm ready to talk again? Is it acknowledging specifically what you did, not a general sorry, a specific one? Accountability. Hello. Major thing for a relationship. Is it giving yourself a defined amount of time to process before you re-engage instead of going cold indefinitely? Processing is good. And one key thing I will tell you about processing, do not allow your partner, or don't think you have to rush that process because you think your partner wants you to rush it. Don't allow your partner to rush it, and don't rush it on the account of your partner. It's basically what I'm telling you. Whatever it is, build it when you're calm. Agree on it together if you can, because repair is not instinctive for people who never saw it modeled. It has to be intentional. You're going to hear that word a lot. Everything has to be intentional. It has to be practiced. And it might be the single most important thing you build in your relationship. So before I close, as always, I'm going to take a look at the comments, see what people are talking about. This is a heavy show. But if I know some of my people, they probably already cracked some jokes in here. So let me see. Let me see what's said. Okay, this is something I'm going to have to answer offline. I'll answer offline. I don't know what this person is talking about. What are you doing not to be rude? Okay. So, like I said, before I let you go, I want to say something about your parents. Yeah, the people who raised you. Not to excuse what they did or didn't do, but to give you something more useful than anger, right? The phrases they used, the silences they modeled, the ways they failed to show up for your voice. Almost none of that was invented by them. I want you to know that. They were handed it, just like they handed it to you. They probably told you to stay in your they were probably told to stay in their place too. Probably told their tears were weakness. Probably grew up in a house where communication meant either silence or warfare. And they did their best with the language that they never were taught. That's something you need to think about. Don't be upset with your parents. They didn't know any better. Now, what I'm saying is that doesn't make it okay, right? But it does make it a cycle. And cycles can be broken. You do know this, right? Not by pretending that it didn't happen, not by overcorrecting so hard you create a new problem, but by doing the actual work of learning what you were never taught. That's important. That's key. Speaking when you want to go quiet, setting the limit when you want to give in, coming back when everything in you wants to disappear. Every generation has a choice point. This conversation right now, this is yours. This is yours. You can pass this down or you can put this down. I'll see you on the next episode. Don't forget to subscribe for clarity.